Hello, this is Paul Benson from Autoweb Design. We are happy to present a recording of the webinar we've put together over the last couple of days. It's gone down really well with some of our clients and some of their peers in the industry, so we thought we'd do a recording so you guys could pass it on to your any key staff or anybody else within the industry. Just a couple of points before we start. I'm here with Martin Dew and David Levett from Autoweb, who'll be giving you the benefit of some of the trends and findings we've seen, as well as some ideas and opportunities that we can maybe look to implement to make a bit of sense of the crazy situation we're going through now. So just to be clear before we start, this is a purely informational recording. You'll notice very clearly there's no sort of sales pitches or no sort of dangling carrots in it. Obviously, if anybody wants any further tips on the back of this, please do reach out to us, anybody at Autoweb. If you need any specific advice or anything more general, we'd be absolutely happy to help. So with that in mind, it's going to take about 20 minutes or so. I'm now going to pass on to Martin, who's going to start this presentation, with David contributing as well in due course. So Martin, over to you.
Great, thanks, Paul. So as Paul mentioned, we've started this webinar series really to create an environment where automotive professionals can come together and talk about digital marketing opportunities and what's going on and what everyone's doing. That said, for the first webinar, we started off with a short presentation about some of the things that we've observed and some opportunities that we see. So I'll get right into it. So the first thing that we discussed was what's been happening in the digital marketing space during the time since the measures put in place for COVID-19. There was an interesting study from eConsultancy that showed that 55% of UK marketers are now saying that products and services are either delayed or under reviewed or essentially cancelled, I suppose, and around about 57% in the US for this period. However, we'll say that as the days roll on, I think that this figure really is going to be changing, but just an interesting statistic to look at. So again, that's from eConsultancy and Marketing Week's report. We have also seen from eMarketer a reduction in the estimated online media spend for the year. Again, not necessarily what we're advocating, but it's just interesting to kind of see how the outbreak of the coronavirus and the various measures are affecting those sorts of estimates. We've also seen a change in review services. So as you might have seen in the news, Google has had to change its approach to Google reviews. One of the contributing factors there being people putting things such as "I went to this place and got coronavirus," for example, this kind of thing in there. So very, very unprecedented and interesting times. But in terms of the automotive sector, we're going to get onto that. But I wanted to show you Google provide a really useful tool so that we can see what search terms are trending within the UK. And I did this the day before our webinar, sometime in the morning, and these were the top search terms. So you can see there a lot of things around coronavirus, and number 5 being Teams, which you might all be familiar with now, using Microsoft Teams during these times of working remotely. Very popular tool, of course. I did the same exercise just before the webinar yesterday around lunchtime, and these were the top trending searches in the UK. So Sports Direct, we know that's been in the news about their employees, etc. B&Q, I guess a lot of people interested in doing DIY whilst they're at home. Number 4 being MOT, which again is very interesting. I think what this kind of shows is, well, A, we need to look at these things to determine how we can help customers during this time of self-isolation and disruption. But also, to me, this shows a bit of a step change from looking at what is coronavirus and how do I work from home, etc., to actually getting on with life as normal, which is interesting. And by normal, I don't mean normal. I mean getting on with tasks, accepting that we're going to be at home for a while. So within the automotive sector, this chart here shows what we've observed over the last 30 days in terms of searches around the used cars topic. So you can see quite a clear decline there, around about 50% of the peak since the various announcements and concerns. If we look at car sales, we have the same thing. So versus the peak, we're around about 50% down in terms of people searching for these things. But interestingly, new car offers, and again, we have to look around the various sample sizes and amounts of people who normally search for these terms that may impact on volatility. But we have seen a bit of an uptick there, versus, following the downward trend. So something definitely to keep an eye on in terms of are people now spending time at home looking at future purchases for new cars. So definitely very interesting, but something to keep an eye on. From our own statistics, we've gathered a sample of similar sized dealerships, and these seem to be the most reasonable stats to present at the moment. So whilst we mentioned there for some key search terms, there's around about 50% fewer searches now, but we're seeing an average of 39% decrease in organic search traffic coming to websites. It's inevitable. I guess the difference between what I presented before and what I'm showing you now is the fact that people will search for brand names and things like that. However, in some good news, we've certainly seen an uptick in online conversion rate. So the percentage of people who come to a website who do inquire, within this sample, we saw an average of 65%. There are variances in that. We've seen quite a standard deviation there, and it's something that we're keeping an eye on. But overall, then, based on this, online inquiries are up, and I suppose that this, against a backdrop of at the time of a webinar, it being very difficult to engage with people face to face, with dealerships now closing, of course, that's actually impossible. So we need to look at leveraging the online visitors in the best possible way to get them to engage, and we're going to talk about how we can do that and take advantage of this opportunity. So just to clarify again, there are opportunities both for people who would have been purchasing who have delayed that and might need to discuss the purchase with you online, versus also people who were not necessarily in the market at the time, but now that they've got a lot more time, potentially, or reduced travel time, more time at home, time to consider purchases for a later stage. So overall, then, consumer behaviour is changing, and we have to change. So a new approach. What do we recommend? And I'll stress that this is a evolving situation. So what you're watching now is where we're at the time of 24th of March. So this might be fairly basic to some viewers, and I apologise if I'm stressing the basics, but they are important. In times when dealerships are not open, or arrangements are different, it's important to update your Google My Business as well as other local listings, which might be left, things like Bing, Facebook, etc. Perhaps consider having an FAQ page around what's happening during the coronavirus to tell people, well, during this period, how do you interact with us? What services are available and what isn't? And what do we recommend if you're looking for a future purchase? And also making use of social media, which is going to be important for getting the message out about what's happening in your business. But beyond the housekeeping, then, we would suggest as automotive digital marketers that we focus on these key areas. And this is where we're going to going to bring David in for some commentary as well. Use the time to update your strategy. As I mentioned before, consumer behaviour is clearly changing. The stats show it. We need to update our strategy. The strategy that we put in place in January is not, or December, not necessarily going to work for the next few weeks. Build audiences. So use the time to increase the amount of potential prospects that can be marketed to in future, but also engage with your existing audiences. And from a technical point of view, make sure that within Google Analytics or whatever web analytics package you're using, the audiences are set up based on what they've done on the website, where they've come from, when they did it. Because somebody who's looked at, for example, new car offers in the last 7 days but hasn't inquired might be a more valuable prospect to somebody who looked at new car offers 30 days ago and hasn't been back. So we need to build those audiences, analyze them, be scientific about it, work out what the average inquiry rate of those is through the different touch points with your business. Engage online prospects to keep salespeople productive. This one goes hand in hand. So let's think about how we can engage people online who would normally have come into the showroom, for example. Measure and improve is absolutely critical. So if the end game here is to get a maximum number of good quality sales leads for our teams, for servicing, for sales, new and used, etc., then we need to measure what consumer behavior is leading to that, because what gets measured can get optimized and improved. And that is to do with setting up appropriate metrics and goals within Google Analytics, and working with your agencies through things like heat maps to have a look at what people are doing on certain pages. And along with that, convert online users, new and old. Let's use these audiences. Let's engage them in the right way. That's positive, and keeping in mind from a brand protection perspective what's going on at the moment, but being useful and informative to these audiences, accepting that perhaps they're not in a purchase position right now, but they're going to be very, very important in a few weeks' time. So, David, I suppose starting with strategy, what's your kind of view on this?
Yeah, hi. I think you've covered most of the points. I mean, the main bit here is, as we've observed so far, in terms of austerity, national practice, behaviour does change. Obviously, at the moment, times are slightly unprecedented in terms of you can't go into a dealership. So how do we target those people? In terms of behaviour change, we've obviously also seen a drop in organic traffic, where people aren't proactively searching for car offers. So it's a time to consider other channels, other ancillary options. So social media, at the moment, we're observing quite a large spike in traffic. It makes sense in terms of how people are now communicating with each other, looking for information. I think, as you pointed out, this isn't necessarily a selling time. The hard transactional sale is not an option for most people, but leveraging your online engagements, whether that's via remarketing, whether you're working on a CRM system with your old and your new clients, staying in touch with those. One of the things we're looking at here is information provision. So one of our clients has got chatbot recently added to their site. So an interesting insight into how people are using that is what they're looking for. This proves that there is a market still out there. So the top search in terms of this particular client, their audiences are asking, are you still open? So in terms of MOTs, car servicing, there is still a requirement for the after sales market. Certainly people are still looking around. People are wanting to know what their options are. As people establish the working at home scenario, you're right in terms of DIY, getting jobs done, those sorts of things. So people are asking for test drives. People are asking for what is the best contact method, get in touch with their dealerships. If you're leasing a car, for example, if your lease is coming up, you may want to know, what are my options here? So working with those people, certainly from a sales perspective, the strategy has to change. We can no longer be reactive to what is coming in. We need to be a lot more proactive in working our audiences, nurturing the relationships with people for when the current environment that we're in lifts and we're good to go. You are strong and able to bounce back quickly. In terms of measuring, this is the important bit. So there are different channels that we can use to find new audiences. Now, whether that is social media, whether that is using Google Display Network, within the display network as well, things that we previously have ignored. So in-app advertising, in-game advertising, to some degree, Google partners as well. We tend to avoid them because we don't get a good return on investment normally. But those times are changing, and now is a time to work outside or think outside the box a little bit. Try different tactics, but make sure that the tactics that you try are measured, and whatever decisions you make are informed decisions based on that data. So one of the things that you can do is also consider micro audience, so micro conversions. So a macro conversion would be a form fill, a test drive, something fairly tangible. A micro conversion is an interaction with your website, whereby it could be number of pages that somebody has viewed, or time spent on site, or it's looking at different ways people are interacting with your site. And whilst it may not provide concrete proof, it does show interaction with the company, and they're the kind of people that you need to work with. Also, in terms of the deep dive side into it, so working out what is going on your site, it's almost a CRM exercise, and making your decisions based on what you're seeing in your data.
Yeah, it makes sense. I guess the thing that I'd add to that, David, is, again, this kind of step change in approach from thinking about leads and prospects within dealerships being people who are phoning up or coming into the dealership who have a name and a face, to also focusing on the anonymous leads. So these are people who haven't inquired yet because they're not right at the cusp of purchase, but they're undertaking activity on the website and with digital marketing activities that indicate that they are part of an audience that's valuable and needs to be nurtured into a purchase.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I think that's the end of our presentation for today. I hope you all found that immensely useful. Martin, David, thanks again for putting this down on record. Guys, just to let you know, this is intended to be production from now until it's needed, really, until we go back to the new normal. We're going to be we'll send invites out to anyone who wants it. Please just email paul.benson@autoweb.co.uk to be added to the list for the live webinars, and we'll be also distributing these via YouTube after the fact. So thanks very much, and good luck with the days and weeks ahead.